President Trump is heading to Central Texas tomorrow to survey flood damage as local authorities continue searching for victims. So far, more than 120 people have died. At least 160 more are still missing. Trump has heaped praise on Texas Governor Greg Abbott and other emergency responders for their handling of this tragedy. Abbott is a fellow Republican and political ally of Trump, and Texas is a state that voted for Trump twice. His approach to Texas marks a stark contrast to the way he handled California wildfires earlier this year. Joining us to discuss, Alex Gangitano, White House reporter here at The Hill. Hey, Alex, first let's discuss the trip. What's the purpose and what's Trump going to be doing?
Yeah, so we'll see the president on the ground there in Central Florida. He's planning on meeting with first responders. He'll also meet with local officials. And according to the White House, he will be meeting with some family members who lost loved ones in these tragic floods. So it's a busy day for him in Texas on Friday. We also are expecting to see Governor Abbott with the president on the ground. So a lot of just assessing the damage and talking to those who have been experiencing this firsthand in Texas.
Now, Alex, as I mentioned in the intro, Trump's approach to Texas is a lot different from the fires earlier this year in California. There, he was quick to attack the state's Democratic officials, especially Governor Gavin Newsom and LA Mayor Karen Bass. He called them incompetent. He was nitpicking local water use and forest management decisions. Now everyone's doing a great job, nothing to see here, even though it seems like there are fair questions about the impact of Trump's cuts to the National Weather Service and what they did to flood preparedness.
That's right. We've heard a lot of positive outreach about Governor Abbott. Even in a cabinet meeting earlier this week, the president touted his strong relationship with Abbott, saying, not to make this political, but we do have a close relationship. And you're right, it is in an interesting contrast to that visit to California earlier this year, when there was a lot of blame game between Trump and Governor Newsom being thrown around when it came to the wildfires response and how that occurred. There's also, as you mentioned, a lot of renewed scrutiny into some of these Trump administration cuts to the likes of the National Weather Service. There was an Austin-based meteorologist who's kind of in charge of telling the outside world updates from the agency. That person took the buyout from the Trump administration earlier this year. So a lot of scrutiny into how things like that might have impacted the preparedness for a storm like this. Of course, there's been scrutiny over this overhaul of the federal government for months now, and this just adds some renewed criticism of that.
Yeah, and Alex, it's not just the National Weather Service. There are questions about FEMA's role here. That's the agency that's going to be in charge with cleanup and putting these lives back together. About a third of FEMA's workforce, some 2,000 employees, have left since Trump came back into office. CNN has a report today that the response to the Texas floods has been slowed by cost controls implemented by FEMA Director Kristi Noem. Is the White House confident in its ability to respond to the Texas floods?
Yeah, the relationship with FEMA has been a really interesting one since the beginning of this Trump second term. We know that the Trump administration was eyeing nixing FEMA altogether. Now we heard in the cabinet meeting earlier this week, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem talking about how it's not up to the federal government to initiate any sort of response efforts. It's up to the states, but FEMA was deployed, is there, and ready to assist. We've also seen her use the word remake in order to, in a way to refer to what the future of FEMA has looked like, as opposed to eliminate, which we had heard them talk about in the past, of completely getting rid of the agency. So we've seen some shifts in rhetoric there. The president himself has said that we won't be seeing any changes to FEMA until after hurricane season is over. But it's interesting, the softening of tone a bit, if FEMA will be remodeled, remade, whatever the term is, as opposed to fully nixed. And I think this is an interesting example of them deploying FEMA when it's needed in Texas. So we'll see what the future of that looks like.
Yeah, I just want to correct myself there. Kristi Noem is the director of the Department of Homeland Security, which FEMA is under. I mixed those two up. But back to FEMA. What is the latest, though? Because there had been this notion from the Trump administration that they were going to phase out FEMA, do away with it after this hurricane season. Has Noem said anything about that? Is that still part of the plan?
Yeah, earlier this week, she basically said that because of the work the Trump administration has taken to streamline FEMA, that's helped with this response effort. So they've alluded to changes that FEMA has undergone, whether that's a part of this overhaul of the federal government or different staffing or whatever else, but that what FEMA looks like now is something that they feel good about in terms of this response effort. And they're also interested still in figuring ways to remake FEMA and, as I mentioned, softening on some of the rhetoric about fully eliminating it. But this is an extenuating circumstance that they've had to deploy FEMA and get them out there quickly to Texas. And so we'll see, in future situations how FEMA is treated in as part of this federal government.
Yeah, major challenge there in Texas for FEMA, and also likely to be some more challenges as hurricane season picks up as we go throughout the summer. We'll continue to follow this, but for now we will leave it at that. Alex Gangitano from the White House, thanks so much.
Thanks, Drew.